According to General Hospital spoilers, Danny Morgan and Rocco Falconeri may discover Drew Cain floating in the sea and struggle to figure out who the victim is. GH has published a preview video for the week of August 25th to 29th, with Rocco and Danny making a shocking discovery. The teenagers are taken aback when they notice a body drifting down by the dock. Of course, depending on the writer's intentions, there are numerous possibilities for how this could play out. If Rick Lansing does not survive Ava Jerome's strike to the head, this could be related to his body disposal. This body may potentially be a throwaway character, similar to Ezra Boyle. However, we must view Drew as a prospective victim. Because threats are being made at Drew left and right, you can expect that someone will try to take his life shortly. Drew could be shot or injured in another way before the harbor is discovered. Drew may still have a chance of survival if Danny and Rocco come to his rescue. Rocco and Danny may be able to rescue Drew's life by bringing him out of the water and resuscitating him. Drew might be saved from drowning and receive the medical care he requires if he is injured. Cameron Matheson announced on Instagram that he will not leave the program, which is worth noting here. Assuming Matheson is telling the truth, we can expect him to remain in some form. That could indicate Drew will survive whatever awful tragedy awaits him. Danny and Rocco may eventually emerge as unexpected heroes for Drew. Even if Drew is killed, it is possible that he is an imposter and the real Drew is still alive somewhere. The program may bring additional surprises as Drew's plot progresses. Regardless, General Hospital rumors indicate that Rocco and Danny will be terrified by the body finding they are about to make, so stay tuned for updates on the shocking news. General Hospital spoilers for the next 3 weeks, August 25th to September 12th, reveal that fans will learn more about Henry Hank Dalton's secret study, Drew Cain is in grave danger, and Nathan West may be involved. During the week of August 25th to 29th, Jason Morgan puts pressure on Britt Westbourne to leave the Five Poppies resort with him. Maxie Jones' family is devastated to learn that she would not be able to recover from her coma and will be transported out of state. Meanwhile, Alexis Davis lashes out in public over Drew's restraining order. Molly Lansing Davis discovers more about Cody Bell and Christina Corinthos Davis' scheme to seduce Ava Jerome. Will Christina reveal the truth once in her life? Elsewhere, Giovanni Gio Palmieri receives excellent advice from Marco Rios and softens toward Dante Falconeri. Fans will watch Sonny Corinthos deliver a pep talk, but is it to Christina or to ADA Justine Turner? Portia Robinson gets an eyeful. Is it her adversary Jordan Ashford cozying up to her husband Curtis Ashford, or is it a classic douchey Drew move? Drew continues to exploit Willow Tate, who is desperate to get her children back, and when Trina Robinson needs assistance, she turns to Kai Taylor. Will Kai ultimately realize Drew is a dog and turn against him to help Trina's family? Drew's troubles worsen from the 1st to the 5th of September. Have you noticed how everyone is taking pot shots at him in public? If we didn't know better, we may believe a whodunit is on the way. Jason returns to the Five Poppies resort to find himself in a battle with Jocelyn and Vaughn. How will Britt fit into this risky situation? The week of September 8th to 12th, fans could discover more about Professor Dalton's study effort. Is there a big surprise on the horizon? Peter August is running the show? And how does Ryan Paevey's homecoming fit into all of this? Has Nathan gone dark? This is the show that brought us Casey the alien, so we shouldn't be surprised to see a clone wandering around, or at least Peter trying to be Nathan. We still don't sure who Paevey is portraying, but we believe he is involved in the complicated plot involving Dalton, Britt, and Jen Sidwell. General Hospital spoilers hint that the following 3 weeks will be exciting, so stay tuned, GH lovers. The night at Port Charles was silent, with an unsettling stillness that allowed every sound to go farther than it should. The lovely ripple of the water at the edge of the pier was broken only by the subtle hum of faraway boats rocking in the current, but the tranquility did not last long. Danny and Rocco had gone out together, following what was meant to be a simple adventure, a way to expend the restless energy they'd both been carrying after another long, tense week of family strife. Neither boy realized that what they were about to discover would change everything. Danny was the first to notice the light splash, which differed from the normal sway of the waves. He came to a halt abruptly, placing his palm on Rocco's arm, his breath seizing in his throat. "Have you heard that?" he muttered, his voice wavering despite his efforts to sound calm. Rocco scowled, gazing into the darkness beyond the dock, his instincts heightened by the unusual tension in the air. He nodded slowly, signaling Danny to remain silent as they approached the edge of the wooden boards. Then they spotted him. At first, the thin shape floating in the hazy moonlight reflection made little sense. Rocco's mind raced to grasp what he was witnessing until Danny gasped, his voice breaking into a harsh, strained scream that pierced the silence. Drew. He was face down in the water, slowly sliding toward the support beams beneath the pier. Panic went through both boys instantaneously, and Rocco was the first to respond, scrambling onto his stomach and reaching out to grab Drew's jacket, but he was too far away. Danny's voice trembled as he groped for his phone, his hands shaking fiercely enough to nearly lose it. "Call somebody! We need help! We need to get him out!" he yelled, his breath shallow and irregular. But his panic gave way to instinct, and he rushed into action. He took off his hoodie and tossed it away, plunging into the frigid water before Rocco could grasp what was happening. The cold hit him like a slap, robbing his breath and searing his chest, but he pushed himself forward, kicking hard and stretched until his fingertips touched Drew's arm. Rocco called encouragement from the dock, his voice tense with fear. "You got him, Danny. Pull him inside. Hurry!" He lay flat on the wooden boards, stretching his arms as far as they would go while Danny battled against the water. Finally, with a rush of adrenaline, Danny was able to throw Drew onto his back and kick for the pier, gasping for air and pushing with all his strength until Rocco grabbed Drew's arm and helped pull him halfway out of the water. The weight was dizzying, and both lads were shivering with tiredness and anxiety by the time they were able to fully drag Drew onto the dock. For a minute, all three of them stood immobile. Drew's soaking body lay motionless on the chilly boards, his clothes clinging to his skin and his face pale beneath the dim glow of the dock lights. Danny knelt beside him, pushing his ear against Drew's chest, his heart racing in his ears. "He's barely breathing," he muttered, holding back sobs. "Rocco, we need help now." Rocco was already on the phone, his voice breaking as he cried at the 911 operator, listing out their location and pleading with someone to come quickly. Every second seemed like an eternity. Danny put his quivering hands against Drew's chest, attempting to recall the CPR techniques he'd learned, his own breathing raspy as tears streamed down his face. "Come on, Drew," he said desperately. "Do not do this. You can't leave us." Drew coughed loudly, spewing water as his body trembled beneath Danny's hands. Relief hit both guys at once, and Rocco dropped the phone, bending down to help Drew shift onto his side so he could breathe more comfortably. His chest rose and fell in shallow, laborious movements, but he was alive. That relief, however, was rapidly overtaken by the gravity of the situation. Drew's neck revealed subtle red markings, deep scrapes that indicated a struggle. The side of his temple appeared swelled, with a bruise developing beneath the surface. Whoever did this didn't just aim to scare him, they tried to murder him. "Someone attacked him," Rocco said, his voice quivering as he examined the injuries. "This wasn't an accident." Danny's expression hardened, his terror giving place to a new level of determination. "We have to tell Dad," he replied, his voice quivering yet firm with determination. "Jason needs to know." The distant sound of sirens got louder, and the flashing lights illuminated the sea red and blue. Paramedics hurried onto the dock, gently moving Danny and Rocco aside to evaluate Drew before placing an oxygen mask over his face and preparing to take him. However, when Drew was hoisted onto the stretcher, his fingers jerked and weakly grasped Danny's wrist. His eyes flickered open for a split second, clouded with anguish but piercing enough to send shivers through Danny's veins. He murmured one hoarse, broken word before passing out again, "Curtis." Danny froze, his mind racing. Curtis? Why would Drew mention his name? Rocco noticed Danny's brows furrowing in uncertainty and worry. Did he just say, Curtis? Danny nodded slowly, his throat dry, as he watched the paramedics transport Drew to the ambulance. His chest constricted as the ramifications set in. If Drew was correct, and Curtis was somehow engaged in whatever happened tonight, nothing about it was random. This was a setup. And if that's true, Drew isn't the only one in peril. By the time they arrived at General Hospital, mayhem had already erupted. Jason was pacing the waiting room, his jaw hard, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides as Sam tried to calm him down. When Danny and Rocco raced in, soaked and plainly scared, Jason grabbed Danny by the shoulders and demanded an explanation. Danny stumbled through the story, his words coming out between trembling breaths. We found him floating, we pulled him out, he paused, choking on the words, and Jason pulled him into a tight hug, holding him close as the gravity of what had just transpired struck him. When Danny finally told him about Drew muttering Curtis' name, Jason froze. His demeanor tightened instantaneously, his eyes darkening with the frightening quiet that accompanied betrayal. Sam looked between the two of them, her words soft but insistent. Jason, it cannot be right. Curtis refused. Jason did not respond. He did not have to. His jaw stiffened, and the expression in his eyes said it all. If Curtis was involved, they were in considerably more serious peril than anyone understood. Drew was back in the hospital, unconscious but stable, and doctors were working to stabilize his breathing and treat the swelling around his skull. The scratches on his neck told a clear story. Someone attempted to strangle him before throwing him into the lake, believing the current would do the job. Sam attempted to obtain answers from the doctors, but they had none yet. Jason, meanwhile, stood silently by Drew's bed, his arms pulled tightly across his chest, his thoughts replaying every recent encounter, peculiar look, and whispered discussion he had with Curtis in the last few weeks. Things that hadn't made sense before were suddenly fitting into place, and none of it looked promising. Rocco waited in the waiting room, nervously hopping his leg as he replayed the night in his brain. He couldn't stop thinking about Drew's pale, lifeless face under the water. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the splash, the silence, and Drew's coughing cough when he awoke. Danny sat next to him, holding a styrofoam cup of water he hadn't touched, his knuckles white from the grip. Danny, Rocco said, coming closer, if Curtis truly did this, what if he comes after us next? What if we were not supposed to see Drew there? Danny swallowed hard, his throat straining with the thought. Then we can't trust anyone, he stated gently. Not until we know who's behind this. Neither boy recognized that someone was already watching them down the hall. A stranger waited silently in the shadows near the nurse's station, wearing a heavy hood drawn low over their face. Their eyes were riveted on Danny and Rocco, unblinking and frigid. The attack on Drew had failed, but the threat was not ended. Curtis was sat alone at the Savoy in Port Charles, nursing a drink and stared blankly into the glass. His phone vibrated on the table, but he ignored it, deep in concentration. Whatever he was hiding was eating away at him, but whether he was Drew's attacker or simply caught up in something far bigger, no one knew for sure. Back at the hospital, Jason made a quiet pledge while standing over Drew's bed. Whoever had done this will regret it. And if Curtis' name was related, if he had any role in Drew's near-death experience, Jason would find out the truth, no matter the cost. However, no one was aware of certain facts. Security footage from the docks had already been deleted, as if the attack had never occurred. And somewhere in the shadows of Port Charles, someone was moving the pieces of a much greater game, one that extended far beyond Drew, a game that was about to bring Danny, Rocco, Jason, and everyone they cared about into harm's way. Drew nearly perished that night, but that was just the beginning. The real storm hadn't even arrived yet. Dalton had been particularly nervous all day, pacing the perimeter of the Corinthos home with a frantic energy that appeared to fill every area of the room. His project, which had been kept secret for months, was now about to be revealed. However, more was at stake than merely his latest creation. Hidden in the shadows of his painstaking labor was a conundrum that only he appeared capable of solving, or one that threatened to swallow him completely if the truth was revealed too soon. He halted by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights of Port Charles, each dazzling reflection on the glass mirroring the weight of the secrets he hid. There was a sense of expectation in the air, a quiet but suffocating suspense that seemed to grab everyone involved with Dalton's endeavor. Meanwhile, whispers of Nathan resumed, arousing both intrigue and anxiety. Many people in Port Charles wondered who Nathan was, or whether he even existed. There were speculations that the enigmatic figure possessed important knowledge that might disrupt lives and shift alliances. The relationship between Nathan and Dalton's work was hazy at best, but just the mention of the name sent shockwaves through the Corinthos estate. People speculated widely, and Dalton had become cautious, fully aware that any slip of information could have devastating effects. Drew, on the other hand, was approaching his breaking point. The carefully crafted facade he had kept up for months was beginning to fracture under the weight of lies, half-truths, and his own reckless desire. He had always been shrewd, calculated, and deadly charming, but Dalton's enigmatic endeavor and Nathan's shadowy presence tested even his abilities. Drew had spent numerous sleepless nights attempting to anticipate every move, reaction, and potential betrayal, but the more he attempted to control, the worse the situation became. Inside the estate, Dalton had recruited a small number of confidants in whom he had complete trust, but the list was less than ever before. Each of them had their own motivations for attending, concealed beneath polite grins and feigned interest. The atmosphere was electric, with tension that could be cut with a knife, making hearts race and minds reel with excitement. Dalton strolled among the visitors with a coolness that belied the tempest brewing behind his collected facade. Every action and glance was meticulously planned to distract, entice, and control those watching him. But there was an evident weight in his eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability that even the most perceptive onlookers couldn't miss. The idea itself was remarkable, and Dalton had poured all of his intelligence and imagination into it. It was more than just a technology or a strategy, it was a statement, a revelation with far-reaching consequences. He delivered it slowly and methodically, building tension with each measured word and well-planned pause. When it eventually became apparent, the reactions were immediate: wonder, disbelief, and horror. Dalton watched as expressions changed, recognizing the intricacies that revealed actual emotions. Some smiled pleasantly, concealing their skepticism. Others leaned in, unable to contain their interest. But behind it all, Dalton could feel Nathan's unseen hand hovering, a presence that appeared to hover on the outskirts of every idea and discussion. The mystery of Nathan had worked its way into the fabric of Dalton's strategy in ways that were virtually hard to unravel. There were shards of information, like breadcrumbs, pointing to a broader truth. Some speculated that Nathan was a dark character from Drew's past, someone whose existence had been purposely concealed to protect specific secrets. Others felt that Nathan was a different creature, a wild card capable of shifting the balance of power at any time. Dalton, for his part, appeared to foresee every query and doubt before they were expressed, expertly manipulating the narrative while leaving just enough ambiguity to keep his audience on edge. Drew, on the other hand, began to exhibit signs of despair. His normal calm had given way to erratic conduct, revealing subtle but visible flaws in the persona he had so carefully created. He walked about the estate with frantic intensity, briefly conversing with guests while screening for threats, evaluating reactions, and calculating his next move. Every glance, every hushed word appeared to hold a hidden meaning for him, as if he were deciphering a code that no one else could see. But the truth was that Dalton's endeavor, along with Nathan's looming presence, had put him in foreign ground, one where control was ephemeral and certainty was impossible. Dalton and Drew's encounters had always been tight, a delicate chess game played out through smiles and looks, polite talk, and disguised threats. However, by tonight, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Dalton's calm confidence seemed to underline Drew's disintegrating situation, with each measured phrase and methodical gesture serving as a reminder of Drew's hazardous position. It was as if Dalton knew precisely where Drew's boundaries were, probing them gently but relentlessly, testing his patience and resilience. The dynamic was both thrilling and horrifying, a psychological duel that had all viewers on edge, waiting for the eventual crack that would mark the end. As the evening went, Dalton let a minor revelation sneak into the discourse, implying that Nathan's involvement was closer than anybody understood. The atmosphere altered, the undercurrent of anxiety transforming into palpable energy that caused hearts to beat. Questions circulated, unspoken but understood, as eyes flew around the room looking for confirmation, denial, or treachery. Dalton's calm appearance persisted, but underlying it was a complicated web of planning and foresight, a plan designed to govern the chaos while leaving just enough uncertainty to keep others guessing. Drew's reactions got more explosive. His movements were sharper, his tone more clipped, and his interactions were tinged with a barely restrained fury. He was used to being several steps ahead, but Dalton's actions, along with Nathan's enigmatic presence, had put him into a reactionary state, something he rarely tolerated. Friends and supporters observed the difference, muttering to one another about Drew's stability and the risk that his carefully managed control was crumbling. Even those who remained loyal to him expressed alarm, unsure whether his decisions in the next hours would represent studied strategy or panic. The project's revelation continued with stunning precision. Dalton provided glimpses of its powers, short demos that hinted at its entire potential while keeping the most important aspects hidden. Each display appeared to have a twin purpose, to impress and intimidate. Guests were lured in by the spectacle, but a sense of dread lingered, an awareness that this was more than just an invention or plan. It was a watershed moment, a force that might disrupt alliances, uncover secrets, and reshape the whole topography of Port Charles's social and political realms. Meanwhile, Nathan's whispers became louder, with threads of supposition running across each talk. Some speculated that Nathan held the secret to Drew's ultimate demise, a piece of information that may destabilize the frail structure of his authority. Others suggested Nathan was an ally of Dalton, a shadow tactician whose involvement had shaped the course of events behind the scenes. Dalton's own actions simply fanned the supposition, a subtle acknowledgement of the mystery that left the guests both intrigued and concerned. Drew's internal conflict grew more apparent as the evening progressed. He alternated between moments of deliberate calm and bursts of unrestrained frustration, resulting in unpredictable and deadly situations. Dalton's meticulous orchestration appeared to highlight every uneasiness, indecision, and concealed dread. Drew, who had once been skilled at directing the narrative, suddenly found himself navigating a landscape defying logic and expectation, a place where instinct and desperation drove acts rather than strategy. Despite the developing crisis, Dalton maintained an almost calm demeanor. He walked effortlessly through the room, interacting carefully, letting just enough information slip to keep Drew off guard while keeping the audience engaged. His ability of perception and timing created an atmosphere in which every word and glance was significant, and minor clues of Nathan's presence became a vital part of the psychological stress. Dalton's dominance was clear, not in extravagant displays, but in the quiet assurance of a man who understood the entire scope of his authority and how to use it precisely. The project's reveal resulted in a moment of collective amazement. Dalton took a step back, allowing the entire extent of his work to become clear, and the reactions were swift and intense. Gasps of surprise, incredulity, and even the rare scream of dread echoed around the room. The ramifications were obvious. Dalton had not only built something amazing, but he had also positioned himself in a way that altered the balance of power. The existence of Nathan, who remained shrouded in mystery, added another dimension of intrigue, implying that the project's true impact was far from clear. Drew's reaction was inevitable and terrible. He tried to retain a sense of control by smiling, nodding, and making nice comments, but the tightness in his body betrayed him. His gaze was constantly drawn to Dalton, evaluating every movement and reaction for any edge that could help him regain his footing. But Dalton had anticipated this, with every micro-expression and fleeting gaze factored into a broader scheme. Drew was forced to take a reactive attitude, responding to Dalton's story rather than leading it, a reversal that left him clearly upset and increasingly frantic. As the evening progressed, the implications of Dalton's endeavor and Nathan's looming riddle became clear to everyone present. The room, once alive with anticipation and speculation, now held a heavy weight, an awareness that the events of the night would reverberate far beyond the walls of the estate. Alliances had evolved, assumptions had been challenged, and the balance of power had unmistakably changed. Drew, for his part, maintained a state of controlled fear, aware that his next steps would determine whether he survived the evening intact or succumbed to the increasing strain that threatened to engulf him. In the calm aftermath, Dalton went to a hidden nook for a moment of reflection. The project was completed, the reveal was immaculate, and the waves of influence were set in motion. But even he understood the game was far from over. Nathan remained an elusive presence, a variable whose significance had yet to be completely exposed, and Drew's desperation portended unforeseeable results. Dalton recognized that control was never absolute, and that even the most methodically crafted plans may be derailed by the unexpected acts of others. Nonetheless, the evening's measured accuracy left one feeling satisfied. Dalton had revealed his idea, hinted at Nathan's presence, and tested Drew's patience. Each move had been planned, each reaction expected, and the outcomes were undeniable. Drew was approaching a point of weakness, and Dalton had made certain that every observer understood it, even if they couldn't fully define the scope of the psychological game that had been played. As Dalton exited the mansion and stepped into the chilly night air, he felt the weight of possibilities land on him. The metropolis of Port Charles sprawled out below, a maze of streets and secrets, each with the potential to upset the delicate balance of power. Nathan's mystery loomed, Drew's breakdown persisted, and the ramifications of the evening's events were only beginning to emerge. Dalton understood the story was far from over, and that the next steps would require even more cunning, patience, and forethought. But, for the first time in months, there was a sense of expectancy, a willingness to face the unknown, accept ambiguity, and negotiate the complex web of intrigue that constituted his world. Every stride Dalton took resonated with purpose, every thought weighed with accuracy, and every glance into the distance had the promise of discovery. The project was no longer a secret, Nathan's presence was no longer a matter of speculation, and Drew's carefully kept authority was no longer unquestioned. The night had set the stage for the following chapter, one that promised peril, discovery, and drama beyond anything seen before. Dalton was ready. The city was watching. Nathan lurked in the shadows, a reminder that nothing in Port Charles is ever as it seems. Jason turned away, clenching his jaw, and tried to keep his emotions under control. Sam finally responded, her voice quiet but steady, "Do whatever you need to do. Save him." Back inside the operating room, the tension rose as the surgery approached its most perilous stage. Dr. Reynolds labored attentively, his movements precise and each decision essential. Drew's vitals dropped suddenly, alarms ringing, sending a tremor of panic through the team. Nurses hurried, the anesthesiologist changed drugs, and Reynolds screamed commands quickly. After what seemed like a lifetime, his statistics stabilized, but the close call shocked everyone. Meanwhile, in the waiting area, Sam unconsciously grabbed Jason's hand, wanting an anchor. Jason didn't back away, just hung on, his normally calm expression betraying flashes of panic and shame. "He can't leave us like this," Sam said quietly, almost to herself. Jason nodded slowly, his voice low but firm, and responded, "He won't. He's a fighter." After nearly 7 exhausting hours, the doors finally opened. Dr. Reynolds stepped out, removing his mask. This time, a tiny smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "He made it," he remarked, his voice firm but tired. Relief rushed over the assembly like a tidal wave. Sam sobbed openly and clung to Jason for support. Carly breathed sharply, clutching her hand to her heart, and Monica finally allowed her tears flow freely. However, the relief was short-lived. The doctor went on, we were able to remove the tumor, but there was some unavoidable trauma to the surrounding tissue. We won't know the full scope of the impact until Drew awakens. It might last hours. It might be days. When Sam was eventually allowed into Drew's room, the sight crushed her heart. He lay motionless, pallid and delicate, his head encased in white bandages, with machines breathing softly beside him. She softly held his hand, tears cascading to the blankets as she said, "You did it. You battled your way back. Please return to me now." Jason stood quietly at the doorway, his heart heavy with emotions he rarely allowed himself to experience. He reflected on all they'd been through, every disagreement and misunderstanding, and silently resolved that if Drew awoke, he'd make things right between them. 2 days later, Drew stirred. His eyes twitched, his breathing increased, and Sam's heart raced up her throat. "Drew," she whispered, leaning in. His lips moved slightly, but no words emerged. His hand twitched weakly, looking for hers, and when their fingers met, a slight smile appeared on his face. But, as relief flowed over Sam, Jason observed something strange in Drew's expression: bewilderment. "Drew, it's me, Sam," she said quietly, her voice shaking with hope. He blinked, his gaze roving aimlessly before eventually landing on her. Instead of recognition, there was only a little frown. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice thin and broken. The room froze. Sam's breath hitched, and Jason tensed instantly, his worst fear realized. Drew didn't recall. The tragic reality dawned on Drew: the surgery had saved his life, but it had also taken away elements of his personality. Drew struggled to understand parts of his history for several days, his recollections flashing inconsistently like a damaged reel of film. Sometimes he remembered Scout's name, and other times he forgot he even had a daughter. His dissatisfaction flared up repeatedly, with wrath and terror engulfing him as he struggled with the shards of his fragmented identity. Sam refused to give up. She spent hours at his bedside, showing him images and narrating stories, hoping to piece him back together. Jason, too, remained close, patient yet attentive, and provided unspoken support for his brother. Carly arranged assistance from the entire family, even pulling ties to bring in the greatest cognitive therapists, while Monica oversaw every aspect of his treatment. But under the surface, darker tensions arose. Drew's trauma and memory gaps reopened ancient wounds, not only between him and Jason, but across the Corinthos family. Long-buried secrets threatened to resurface, as decisions made in the shadows returned to haunt them. Drew's fight was far from finished. Surviving the operation was just the beginning. Now came the more difficult battle: reconstructing his life, retrieving his memories, and confronting the decisions that led him here. And, while the route ahead was uncertain, one thing was certain: Port Charles would never be the same again.